welcome to the channel. My name is Ron Guth, and today I am going to present an interview I had the other day with a friend and fellow researcher, Saul Teichman. Saul is probably best known for the work that he's done on the uspatterns.com website. If you're familiar at all with the United States pattern coins, you know how important Saul's work has been to advancing the knowledge in this particular series. He's been collecting for decades, and some of his stories are fascinating. The interview took actually over an hour, and I was able to edit it down to about 59 minutes. So I split it up into two different parts. So what you'll see here shortly is part number one. And in it, Saul talks about his collecting history, how he got started, and then some of his insights into United States pattern coins and, the market in general. So it's a very broad-ranging conversation. I hope you'll enjoy it. I had a great time doing it, and I actually learned a lot. One of the nice things about these interviews is I get to know these people that I've literally known for decades, and I thought I knew them, but I tell you what, you sit down with them and talk to them for an hour, and you'll find out that they are really special people, and there's a lot more to them than you might suspect. So I hope you enjoy the interview. Please be sure to subscribe to the channel and definitely hit the notification bell, because that way YouTube will notify you every time that I post a new video. Hit the like button, and please be sure to leave a comment. I mean, if you have a question about anything numismatic, please put it in the comment section below. I read all the comments, I respond to all of them, and you might even make a suggestion for a future video that I can present down the road. So thank you for your time again, and now let's move right into my interview with Saul Teichman. Hi, Saul. How are you doing?
Hey, Ron. All's well. And you?
I'm doing really well. I really appreciate you coming on board here for this interview, and I look forward to hearing your story again. For the viewers, we interviewed 2 days ago, and the tech failed us. So hopefully today we'll have a really nice repeat interview and go over some of the great stories that Saul gave us last time. Saul, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us how you got started in coins and when?
Well, to start with coins was actually in the 60s. My father was a pharmacist, so he had his own drugstore. So we, in the 60s, if everyone remembers, we had access to silver coinage and all that. So I was always pulling coinage out of the cash register, replacing it in the mid 60s when the flat coinage came out. So I was always getting, silver quarters and half dollars and dollars. So that's really how I started with that. My grandmother also had a $5 gold piece. I think it was a 1902S. I can't remember for sure, but it was a $5 gold piece. She had a little pouch, and she also had a coin chain, like a bracelet. And that actually, and I don't know how she got it, but she actually had an 1876 cc quarter and 1875 S20 piece on the actual chain. Besides foreign coins as well, because my family that part of my family came from Austria, but she had those on a chain. So that's basically where the coin collecting started for me, was with that. And then the change, of course, from clad coins to silver, where I would pull coinage out of the register, the silver coins out.
So that's really were you like a so-called silver stacker, or were you putting together sets of coins?
Yeah, not at the time. We ended up pulling out 105 Morgan and Peace dollars. I had that literally out of the register. People, believe it or not, actually used them back then. It was rare, but even silver dollars you would get. And then I started collecting from there. So I was able to always pull pennies out, and nickels and dimes. So I had the standard like Whitman albums of Jefferson nickels and Washington quarters and Lincoln pennies. So it was easy to collect that stuff at that time.
Yeah, there was a lot of it floating around.
Yeah, I probably still have them rolls, and then I would collect what I missed. Essentially, I'd go to an occasional coin shop on the island after that and collect. That's That's basically how I started. I was buying proof sets and I dollars and things like that, and uncirculated sets from basically from the late 60s to probably around after the bicentennial, probably to like 1979, 1980, around there.
Yeah, well, that was the big silver boom in the coin market. What happened at that point for you?
Well, at that point, I had that stuff. I was collecting at that point. Then I went to a coin show in the city. They used to have them at the Sheraton Hotel. I was at 55th Street and 7th Avenue, for those who remember those days. And I went to one of the dealers. His name was Renrob. That was Bob Rose and Renniskowitz back then. And the first coin I actually purchased, I actually traded for. They had an 1897 proof Morgan dollar that probably would grade at a 67 cameo today. I actually traded for that coin by selling things like proof sets and that. And at that time, I also had bought my first pattern around that time, which was but not from them. That I bought, it was it's called a Judge 1075, which was a long acre dime in copper without stars. And that coin was from the Ruby collection that Superior sold, like I think in 1973, around that time frame. I bought that for $575. That was the first pattern I bought. And then from Renrod, they trading more of that stuff. I got a shield earring quarter. I don't remember which dealer had that, but that was the first major pattern I bought.
For the benefit of our viewers, what is a pattern coin?
A pattern coin is a precursor to our regular coinage. Before they came up with, let's say, a Mercury dime or Washington quarter, they would make designs. They would make design trial pieces. They would test dies. They would test designs made by our engravers, and basically, when it got to the point where they produced an actual coin, that's what a pattern is. Often they look like the ones we have today, but struck a year earlier. Otherwise, they could be completely different. Otherwise, other things patterns would created was to test new metals, like the copper clad coinage. They used to test those. Actually, used dummy dies for that. Called Martha Washington designs. The first clad coinage is actually on that, for example, that you can collect, and things like that. That's what a pattern is. It's a test a new metal, a new design, a new denomination. In the old days, we had 3-cent pieces and 2-cent pieces that were struck. Those are long gone today, but back then, the first, when they decided to make those designs for the first time, they would create trial pieces with new designs of their own.
So patterns are a rather sophisticated area of collecting, mostly because they're very rare or they're very expensive. How does a collector like you make the jump from Ike dollars to patterns?
When I used to go to those shows in New York, there was a collector. His name was Julius Turoff, who had a magnificent collection of patterns he would display at these shows. He put them on coin tains, which are these little plastic containers, and put them on felt on top of these felt set bags, literally. And he would just display them. He had a beautiful collection of patterns that actually sold in 1994. He had sold his non-pattern stuff in the 70s with Bowers and Ruddy back then. But he sold those coins in 1994. But before that, he would display them all the time. He had just a magnificent collection of what they call a long acre seated Liberty design of 1871. I wish we could show some pictures of things, but of that, he had 2 schoolgirl dolls in silver. He had a wash lady quarter. He had a shield earring set, a quarter, half, and dollar. That weren't the ones that were in that 1976 sale that has his name by that. That was Dr. Judd's collection of patterns. That was someone in Florida owned those at the time, which is interesting. Everyone thinks when they see that collect that those coins were his. They weren't. He had his own set. That set sold in 1994. He bought those individually from auctions at Stax and some other places. So that's just from an aside, but that's where that came. And I just thought they were so neat. One thing, they were all in proof, so they look real nice.
Julius Turoff was one of your ideals, and he displayed the coins there, right? They were just on exhibit. Were they for sale?
Yeah. No, at the time they were just on exhibit. He would do something on like, for example, on dollars, and he would show all his pattern dollars and display them. And again, it's a wonderful collection. If you have, I don't know if you have any of your old catalogs, but if you have the Bowers and Moraine March 1994 catalog, the patterns in that collection were all his. If you have that catalog, I see you a lot of coin books behind you. If you do have, if
Yeah,
you keep any
I'm
auction
sure I've
catalog,
got the catalog here somewhere.
yeah, if not, they're
Were,
on the Newman portal.
were you active in the coin clubs in your area? What was your affiliation with
No,
those?
no, not really. There used to be an occasional coin show at like the Veterans of Foreign War buildings, like where I live and places like that. And one out on the island I would go to. I never went to an an auction outside of the city till really the 90s. When I was after college, when I was able to drive. So I would go to the Baltimore show. I went to the A&A show in Philly when they had one there. There's not a lot of Eastern shows anymore. That's one of the problems for people collecting today. There's just no sales
Yeah,
or
they
auctions you can go to any.
have to go online, which is where a lot of people are nowadays. Do you have a profession outside of numismatics, or is numismatics like your life?
No. I worked for Ernst& Young. Back then, back in the 70s, I worked at Sony Corporation. Then I worked at Panasonic, and then I worked at Ernst& Young for the last almost 25 years. I do computer work. I used to be a mainframe programmer, and COBOL and things like that. And then I did special reporting. I also did accounting work. So, I have a math background. So I've done that today. Today I work, for Ernst & Young, but I work internally. I don't go out to like client sites or anything. I work on their internal systems that we have. They have another worldwide global net company. So they have multiple systems. I work on getting two of the systems to talk to each other as they upgrade from an old system. It's called coexistence until they get rid of the other system. I'm responsible for that. And I have a team of consultants that report to me from out of India and the Philippines. And that's what I do for a living right now.
You collect patterns. Are there any particular patterns that you prefer over others?
As far as type, I probably have like 50 or 60 patterns in my collection. A lot of them are aluminum. Just because they were sort of the types I like, that was the rarest of the metals. I have a lot of the 1870 and 1871 seeded coinage and patterns. I have five 1877 half dollars, which is another one of the areas I like. 4 in copper and one silver one that actually circulated. I actually got spent. There's only 2 of those that got spent. You remember the pattern coin starters proofs, but even then, some of them got spent. And some coins I consider patterns really aren't, but that's, they circulated quite often because they actually were in circulation, like an 1836 Gobrecht dollar or an 1856 Flying Eagle cent. Those actually circulated quite readily. They were put into circulation. They're not patterns, even though they're collected as such by a lot of people.
Yeah, one of the things I've noticed as you go through the Judd book, there's some interesting items in there that you wonder, are these really patterns? I mean, there's like some of the error coins that are in there. What's your take on some of those?
The most obvious error coins that show up in the pattern book are generally Indian cents that are in nickel. For example, those tend to be the ones that are the most, because they didn't realize that they were struck on foreign planchets. In 1876 and 1877, our mint struck coinage for Venezuela, for example, and those planchets are among the ones that see that the most. If you ever look at old auction catalogs, and the other thing you'd see, sometimes you would find they would call a pattern like a shield nickel that was on a smaller, they called it a root copper planchet. It was on a penny planchet. That was actually a mint error where a penny planchet got in there by mistake. And those are mint errors. But there are die trials that are legitimate like that. If a coin's full size, usually it is a die trial where they were just testing the dies, as opposed to a mint error where the coin's on the wrong planchet. There are actually copper sets. The mint actually sold copper sets, and they also sold cased aluminum sets in 1868, which are very rare today. Unfortunately, there used to be 3 cased sets that in aluminum that were complete. Now there's only 1. Because the Garrett set was broken up and Eric Newman's set was broken up when they sold his collection. So there's only one cased aluminum set now that's still intact.
The cases were made by the mint or for the mint, or
made for the mint. There's I've only seen them for 1868. There are some cases that were made by other people had purchased things that for themselves. Probably the most famous things that people really see today are there were cased proof sets in the 1840s that were the that included gold pieces that were made, but that were also made for the mint. Those aren't related to patterns, but they did make actually cases. The mint actually sold proof sets in cases to people, and they exist from like 1843 to 1846. John Pittman had a lot of those proof sets. He assembled some of them, but his 1846 set was real, and complete, as a set. The Eric Newman's had a set where the gold was missing, and the funny thing was that was an original case set. But J.F. Bell didn't want the silver pieces. So B.G. Johnson, when he sold the set, it was owned by, I believe, by Colonel Green at the time. He purchased the gold, and B.G. Johnson kept the set. And Newman actually got the set after B.G. Johnson died. So he had a complete case set that sold in the first Heritage Newman sale, but it was missing the gold. But the gold set, it would have been nice if someone actually still had those gold coinage in the 1845 set and put it back together. And Amon Carter's set, I don't know if it's around either. That set was intact. All the Pittmans, I believe, have been broken up. I don't know where the Carter set. I think that Carter set was stolen or something. I don't know where that is today. As far as case sets, Mint had custom ones made in the 40s. And then they had these case sets made in the for 1868. Like I said, if you have, and you can see those in the Garrett catalog. If you go to the Heritage site, you can see them. They show pictures of the cases, and I have it on my website as well. On the pattern website, I have the case set image.
Tell us about your pattern site. I mean, you're very well known for your research in U.S. patterns. So tell us a little bit about that.
Between the last Judd book came out like in the late 70s or early 80s, the 7th edition. And between then, there was no new updated pattern book for almost 20 years. So people knew I had helped Andy Pollock with his book, as far as doing some research and supplying some pedigrees and other information for it. So they knew I knew that. So they asked about potentially putting one online. So it became me, Andy Lustig, David Cassell, who specialized in what's called postage currency patterns, which were basically used to literally buy postage stamps, but using silver coins that was had a little less silver in it. Those coins actually had a little less silver in it than they were supposed to. But and Alan Mayrick, who collected 2-cent pieces and researched 2-cent patterns, and we essentially put up the site. I built all the cross-reference tables between all the books. For those who are not aware, the original pattern book was done in 1913 by Edgar Adams and William Wooden, based mostly on Wooden's collection of patterns, himself. And he got most of that for returning two $50 gold pieces in gold patterns to the mint. He got a lot of his patterns from that. And then there was, then the Judd book came out first in 1959, and basically there wasn't a pattern book since. So we decided, since no one at the time, and I don't know if Whitman had the rights to the book at that time, but basically at that time, the pattern books were out of date. So we literally put it up on the website. So we cross-referenced all the books, so they had their Adams and Wooden numbers and their Judd numbers. And Don Taxi created a pattern book in 1976. He called this Comprehensive Encyclopedia. But that, we included their EP numbers. He called it essay and pattern numbers, and we cross-referenced them. Then we put up pictures. We took images from the sites. Heritage's website was available to take pictures from. Stacks at the time it was Bowers and Miranda. They were more than welcome. Superior. They're more than willing to let us use their images. And I went to the museums and got the pieces that were missing, and paid for images to put up on the website. So we put up descriptions. We put up rarities. We put up, there's over 2,000 patterns. So we actually have pictures of almost every coin has a picture up there, and they're legitimate coins. Even ones that were, none of the other books had what we have on the website picture-wise.
How often are new patterns discovered? I mean, are there discoveries being made frequently, or what happens?
These days, it's rare. Most of the grading services will get something in that they haven't seen. They'll usually ping me, see if I've ever heard of it or seen it. Most of the time, if it's a pattern, it's something maybe in a metal that they weren't expecting, or how to classify things. Every so often, if you get new items, it's for oddball, more of the modern stuff. Like when they, but beyond that, it's rare that the pattern comes up today that we haven't. That's from like the 1800s. That's brand new out of that's never been seen before. That's extremely rare, and it's rare. You may get maybe 1 or 2 of those a year at most. It's rare that something comes up today I said, usually it's things that are struck outside the mint that are like Appendix C of the Judd book that like all of a sudden will come up in nickel or another metal that no one's seen before. And we just added, we had a Pollock number to it and a Judd number and add them if we can.
So are you the guy? Are you the guy that assigns the new numbers?
Pretty much.
Oh.
For the splashers and things like that, yeah. They'll usually come to me. And then we, I work with Whitman Publishing to fix, that they redid the Judd book from the 8th edition on. So, if there's something comes up, we include that, in the list of things that are missing, or in a rot if there's mistakes in the books, we fix them when the next edition comes out. I don't know when the next one's coming out though, at this time. I really don't.
So you mentioned some of the patterns that you have in your collection. What is your number one favorite pattern of all time? If you had a million, well, it'd probably take more, but if you had all the money in the world, what pattern coin would you pick?
For me, I would buy the ultra high relief zinc ones. It's just the nicest looking. It's the neatest coin in that relief. That would probably be my first choice. My second would probably be a schoolgirl dollar, as opposed to a lot of people like the Indian head 20, that that famous Indian head 20 that St. Gordon's also made. But I like the schoolgirl pattern. There's also a $5 gold pattern from 1873 that I like that they call the Amazonian back, but it has a different front. Right now, there's only two known of that. One's in the Simpson collection, and the other was from the Fruch sale and hasn't been seen since 1954. But I'd like to own one of those. And going way back, I wouldn't mind owning one of these 1792 quarters. I think those are neat.
Yeah, they're beautiful. They're beautiful. A lot of people that I talk, a lot of dealers, if I ask them the question, what's your number one U.S. coin? A lot of them say the 1849 20. What's your take on that?
That's probably the most valuable coin. As far as if any coin ever came to auction, that would bring the most for any U.S. coin, even more than the 33 did. Whatever that brought, like $18 million. And the funny thing is, there's 13 of those floating around, besides that one. So that's interesting too. But 12 of them are sitting in the government's hands. And the one was returned. That was the Nafska Browning coin was returned to the government, so they own that one too now. And then you have the Fruch coin that sold for the $18 million. And who knows if there are more out there. You wonder if the Swiss had more than the 10 that they gave.
So what do you think the 1849 20 would bring in today's market?
It's probably 25 million, maybe more. To me, that's the most valuable. And then after that would be the half unions, the $250 gold patterns that are in the Smithsonian. Those are probably the next most valuable coins because each is unique and they're big. They have an impressive look to them because of their size.
There was a controversy about those way back when. Tell us about that.
Well, what happened was William Snowden, who actually worked at the mint at the time, I forget if he was director or whatever the case may be, actually was the source for most of the gold, for most of the patterns that are out there today, to be honest. So what he did is if he saw something he liked and after it was struck and they rejected it, he would buy them at face value. So he basically bought those $250 gold patterns and several others. One of the most famous gold sets of patterns is a gold set from the $1 $20. It's called an Amazonian set in 1872. He owned that set as well, and he literally bought them at face value. Because the only thing the mint cared about was making sure that their books balanced for the weight of their precious metals, gold, silver, and stuff like that. That's all they had to do. So he actually purchased it all and kept it. And then he sold those two half unions to William Wooden via Hazeltine, and the net result is that cost him flack at the mint. I forget it was Piet Andrew. I forget his first initial, but he wasn't happy with the fact that all of a sudden mint products were showing up in the marketplace, to put it simply. So they essentially wanted them back. And Snowden, like I said, Wooden, according to numismatists at the time, paid $10,000 each for those coins.
Snowden got them for face value and sold it for $10,000 each.
Yeah, so for $100, he sold them for 20 grand. And the mint wasn't happy with all that stuff, so the mint was fighting with Wooden, and Wooden said, "I got him." Apparently, got back to Snowden. So what happened is, essentially, is Snowden paid off Wooden with all the other patterns he had bought at face value, and Snowden took back those 2 coins and gave them to the mint, and the mint kept them in the mint collection. It's been there ever since.
I've heard the patterns that Snowden had referred to as a trunk full of patterns.
Yeah, we have some idea of what was in them, because some patterns are very rare up to that point. Most of the ones in there were from the 1870s on. There's also gaps in the mint collection. If you ever look at the Smithsonian inventory of patterns, once you get past like 1872, 1873, there's scant patterns in there. They have certain ones from like, but they're missing a lot of stuff from 1875, 1876, 1877, 1878. There's a bunch of patterns in that time frame that are missing in the pattern collection from the Smithsonian field. So a lot of them were in that date range. There might have been older stuff as well, some Goldberg dollars and other things. But the point is that people realize that the mint directors and stuff, they were collectors. They had their own collections. Henry Linderman had a wonderful collection, including an $1804 restrike and a ton of patterns. That people, speaking of a case set, he had a case set of 1877 patterns that were broken up apparently, but it would have been nice if that was still in its case. But they were collectors. And they basically all the 1877 patterns. It's like the schoolgirl was a very rare pattern at that time. There are 15 in silver and maybe another 13 or 15 in copper that are known today. But back in 1910, there were only a handful of them. There may be 3 or 4 silver ones, and the copper. There's only the one known that I know of at that time was the Woods. That was in the collection was Woodside's, and that went to Brand. Virgil Brand bought that privately from him. So the point is that all those patterns, the schoolgirls that are popular, the wash ladies, a lot of those stuff, all those gold patterns from 1872 to, except for a couple, the 2 Bickford 10s that are from 1874, there are $10 ones that were international coinage. Maybe we can eventually be able to show some of those when you re-edit this. You'll see that a lot of those patterns, 1875 sailor's head patterns, all of that stuff came from Snowden to Wooden as part of that trade to get the coins. There's a bunch of that kind of stuff that was sold in that point, in that time frame. That's basically all.
The guys who ran the mint were really taking advantage of their position.
Yeah. They weren't stupid.
Let's talk about modern day collectors. John Wilkeson, who had the big collection of gold patterns. Tell me what you know about some of the modern guys, Simpson and so on.
Well, Wilkeson started collecting gold patterns in the 40s. He bought, and he had trouble buying them because he didn't know. One thing, they never showed up on the marketplace. Probably because they were well held. They were, a lot of them were in the Farouk collection. King Farouk had a wonderful collection of American coinage, to say nothing of every other country. But when he was ousted from Egypt, they sold his collection. Wilkeson bought a lot of the patterns from there. Dr. Judd had some patterns, and Wilkeson basically had a wonderful collection of proof gold coins that he sold to Kostoff and traded for Judd's patterns. He merged them. And then they got sold to Paramount in 1973, I believe it was. So he had a wonderful collection, including an extra high relief that he bought at the 56 A&A, and he completed. He bought the Amazonian 1872 Amazonian gold set, except for the gold dollar. Dr. Judd had that, but he bought the other 5 at the Farouk sale. So the majority of the gold patterns that exist today that aren't in a museum came from Dr. Wilkeson. Except for the only ones that were really available for people to purchase were gold dollar patterns, 1852 gold dollar patterns, and some 1849 hand engraved ones. Those are the only ones that really were in the marketplace prior to Dr. Wilkeson, his collection being sold for modern collectors today in the 70s or later. Beyond that, they were just very rare. Now Simpson started collecting patterns. Legends helped numismatics, has helped him build a wonderful collection, not just of patterns, but of everything. But when I was basically, and he did most of that literally in the past, probably since 2000, maybe the last 15 years. But one thing, there were 2 major buyers in the pattern market, him and one other person, what I always call the Southern collection. In my website and other things. And he basically bought them out. He spent, I think they said it was $36 million. And he basically built a collection of 1,500 patterns that way, Mr. Simpson. Now, and of course, now he's been selling them off, but he still has a wonderful collection of patterns. You know, even with what he's sold, he probably still has 100 patterns that are, you know, that are worth millions, including the Amazonian set. He kept the set. One of the things I think that is most impressive about his collection is that there's about 17 or 18 of the those what we call Amazonian patterns in you know, gold. And I'm sorry, in aluminum. There's about 3 of each date. He owned almost every one of them except for the one $10 Smithsonian, and there's 120 that's been missing for a long time. So he actually, out of 18, he owns 16 out of the 17 that are known to be around today at one time. And he still has a set of them. He has a set in gold, a set in copper, a set in aluminum, and a set of gilt copper. And no one's ever done that before.
That's very impressive.
That's the highlight of what he still has in patterns. And he's got a lot of what we call the long 1870 long acres without the stars. He's got a very big run of those. Those were never sold. He sold the ones with stars, but he kept those. And he's got other rare patterns. That 1337 that I mentioned, the 1873, he's got a set of those in silver. I'm sorry, in gold, copper, and aluminum, and I think he still has the Judd 1490 and 91, 92 set, and probably other things. But you know, and then now the good news for us is the marketplace is starting to sell that, and of course, and now the Best collection is coming out. Best had 600 basically 600 patterns that he purchased basically between the mid 60s to the early 70s, pretty much. And that, you know, a lot of it was sold in 1999 when most of the Best collection was sold, but now the core collection is being sold. And there's about 130 patterns there that have been off the market for 50 years. And they brought insane prices really in the first sale. You know, but we'll see what happens in the next 3. But those are the major, you know, the other major collections. I guess, you know, Rudy Seek's collection sold in 1981. That was a big collection that had also like 400 or 500 patterns. There was the Walter Crouch collection that sold in 1967. It also had like 400 patterns. Those are the ones that, you know, had volumes of patterns that have been offered in, you know, in our lifetime. The Eliasberg collection had some patterns, but he didn't really collect them. Whatever he got there was from John M. and John H. Clapp. When he purchased the Clapp collection, he just didn't sell the patterns.
You got it by accident.
Yeah, he just kept them. So he had a schoolgirl dollar. He had some nice patterns. He had a shield earring, in $1 and quarter, for example. The half must have disappeared because that was all from the Jenks collection in 1921. I don't know what happened to the half. The half somehow got lost or misplaced along the years. But those are the main collections, you know, within recent times that come to my head, right, you know, off the top of my head, as being major, you know, collections that have a large number of patterns. Julius Turoff, who I mentioned earlier, his collection sold in March of 1994, and that had like probably 100 patterns of, you know, and had a nice run of the 1871 long acres, including an aluminum half. He had 2 schoolgirl dollars, and only one of them sold in that auction. The other he sold privately. The nicer one, and in fact, that coin is the one that was. It's in right now. It's in a PCGS 66 cameo holder, and it's nicer than the Bass coin that just sold, even though that one was graded higher. And that coin sold for over $300,000, you know, a couple of years ago. But those were, you know, he paid like nothing for that, maybe $2,000. So it's going to show you how the marketplace has changed over time. You know, pattern coins, you know, you could buy a nice run of patterns, like when Mr. Bass bought his in the 70s. You know, you get a nice 1870s at $50 for $600, maybe $700. Today, that same coin is going to sell for $60,000.
Yeah, those days are gone. Yeah.
Yeah.